This is Mark Davis from The Thoughtful Gamer, and this is Reviews of the Nerds. Happy New Year, everybody. I've got one here that you probably haven't heard of before. Mabel Holland's The Field of the Cloth of Gold is a game of extreme passive aggressiveness. With a smile and a wink, it puts players in impossible situations where they need to figure out how to not lose the best. It's a game about giving people gifts but being a real jerk about it. The historical background is almost too ridiculous to believe. In 1520, Henry VIII and Francis I met to see who could blow the most money in the most extravagant ways. The Field of the Cloth of Gold has no business being as thematic as it is. On any given turn of the game, you will have precisely two choices of where to move one of your pieces. I'd call it an abstract game, but it somehow manages to capture something of the absurdity of fancy people doing that thing where they do the performance of something nice while actually inconveniencing you. You'll be collecting tiles of 4 different colors and then cashing in those tiles for points on the various action spaces. The problem is that there's only 2 options, and after cashing in points at most of the action spaces, the tiles that you have revealed and scored are gone from the game forever. So it's a game about scoring points, but often it's a game about not scoring points, at least for a while, until you can collect enough tiles to score even better than you had before. The key here is that this is a game about manipulating the state of the board more than it is about actually doing things. It's about forcing your opponent to give you the things that you need to win the game. To wit, every single action space has a random tile beneath it, and when you go to that space, you give your opponent the tile. So not only do you control what options your opponent has, you also controls the color of the tiles that they collect. It's a remarkable game that will probably never get the broad recognition it deserves, and that's a real shame. Hollandspiel is a very small company that utilizes print on demand so that they can make experimental, weird, quirky games, and I highly recommend you check out this one. It's extremely accessible and an absolute riot. You can read more about this game and others at thethoughtfulgamer.com.
Today in Nerd History, the last great newspaper comic. Nerd History. When Bill Watterson was desperate to find a way out of his job in advertising, he started devoting his spare time to creating a comic strip to pitch to syndicates. He came up with several ideas that were all rejected, but one of them showed promise: The Doghouse, which featured a side character, little brother, and a stuffed tiger. He then developed a story around this mischievous, adventurous, and imaginative boy and his sardonic stuffed tiger that would be alive to him, but nobody else. And in November of 1985, Calvin and Hobbes debuted in 35 newspapers and quickly became a hit. Within a year, it went from 35 to roughly 250 newspapers nationwide. Within the first 3 weeks of its run, all the central characters were introduced, and this cast remained unchanged for the entirety. The care and attention this strip was given earned it several awards and accolades, and has influenced pop culture in many subtle ways. With ongoing stories featuring alter egos like Spaceman Spiff and Stupendous Man, as well as elements like Calvin Ball, cardboard boxes being used in imaginative ways, and gruesome snowman deaths, the strip got popular fast and remained so its whole run. And this was despite a lack of merchandising, something Bill Watterson was against, believing the work should be able to stand on its own, which would become a source of contention between him and his syndicate publisher for years and lead to him having to take a few sabbaticals to mentally recover. After returning from his last sabbatical in 1994, Bill informed his publishers and newspapers across the country and world that 1995 would be his last year with creating Calvin and Hobbes, with his final comic being published on Sunday, December 31st, 1995. The strip was a full-color Sunday comic featuring Calvin and Hobbes hopping on a sled on a snowy day, off to find adventure. Calvin and Hobbes continues to be found running in a 10-year loop in many newspapers still, and remains the most viewed comic on the Go Comics website still to this day. And as one critic put it 10 years later in 2005, the end of Calvin and Hobbes has left a void in the world of newspaper comics that no one has been able to fill. You can pick up the entire 10-year collection in a nice hardcover 4-volume set on Amazon for about $70 at the time of this recording. Why not go to smile.amazon.com and choose Love Thy Nerd as your charity of choice while you're at it? That way you can support LTN when you buy this set or anything else on Amazon without costing you a single extra penny. I'm Radio Matt. See you next time for more Nerd History.
Hey everyone, I'm Hector Miray, and this is Faith and Fandom 180 on LTN Radio. You ever have a situation where all of a sudden a celebrity has blown up that you've never heard of? Like, a week ago they didn't exist, and now all of a sudden they're the biggest name in Hollywood. And usually when that happens, these people have been doing the work for years. We just don't ever actually pay attention to them. Point in case, Haley Steinfeld. If you had have asked me 2 years ago who this girl was, I couldn't have told you. Apparently I saw her in a Pitch Perfect movie, but I didn't know who she was. Then she was Gwen in Into the Spider-Verse. Then she's Kate Bishop in Hawkeye, and she's Vi in Arcane. All of a sudden, this young lady has blown up into my world, and now I know her name. She's a big deal. My daughters love her, and it's a recent thing. Also, in the same breath, Jonathan Majors, guy who I didn't know who he existed, and then all of a sudden, in a year's time, he's starring in Lovecraft Country. He's Kang the Conqueror in Loki and all of Marvel now, and he just had The Harder They Fall. I mean, the guy went from I don't know who you are to you're on 4 screens at my house at once. And it's one of these things that we need to understand. Just because it's not blowing up at one time doesn't mean people aren't doing the right thing or going through a hard time even. It just means that we haven't noticed what's happening. And it reminds me of the story in Acts chapter 5, verses 14 and 15. Just to tell you, the disciples are growing leaps and bounds. The church is growing. Acts 5:14 says, "Nevertheless, more and more men and women believed in the Lord and were added to their number." Verse 15 says, "As a result, people brought the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and mats so that at least Peter's shadow might fall on some of them as he passed by." And it cracks me up because I'm reading this like Peter's some gangster rock star, when this is the guy that Jesus called Satan, and the guy who almost drowned walking on water and stuck his foot in his mouth all the time. So I just want to encourage you. Maybe you feel like you've been in the shadows and you haven't, air quotes, blown up. But just keep in mind, God can take somebody like Peter and put them in a situation where people are looking for their shadow. Just keep doing what you're doing. Remember to catch Faith and Fandom 180 every Wednesday morning on the Back Row Morning Show, only on LTN Radio. And if you'd like to learn more about Faith and Fandom, head over to faithandfandom.org, where you can learn about our Comic-Con ministry, podcasts, memes, apparel, and book series. You can even read new chapters before they make it to the next book. I'm Hector Miray, and thank you for spending the last 180 seconds with me.